Hello and welcome everyone back to the Ælfric Homily Project. This is lecture number 11, actually, as we are now uh, right in line with what month we're in, as I missed October. So essentially, I just had a really busy October, um, and the lecture I decided to do was even delaying me longer, as some of these for the Old English, I'm able just to copy and paste the Old English text as it comes from Thorpe normally. Um, that was not the case with the one I wanted to do in October, which was De Falsis Dis, which is against false gods. I had to type it out manually, and that was taking me too much time that I hardly even got to the translation at all. And so hopefully early next year, um, that'll be the one that I do first. Next year, again, I am not going to be set on doing one of these a month. I would like to, if it turns out that I can. But that was definitely a big part of the project this year. To kick it off was to do one a month, and unfortunately, I missed one. But still not bad. So today we're going to talk about the Feast of Saint Clement, an apostolic father, one of the first popes of Rome, or popes, I guess, bishops of Rome. Um, though at that point, very early in the church, there was not really anything putting Rome above any of the other cities with patriarchs and stuff in them. So this actually come out, I believe, on St. Catherine's Day, Catherine of Alexandria's. I think it's Athelflaed's feast day when I'm recording this. Anyways, so let's get right into it. And I miss doing this. I like doing this. This is my jam. So this is of course from series 1. Actually, I do have some news on this account as far as next year is concerned. I've been using this book that is on the screen here, which is right here. In December, of course, we're going to look at the very first homily in here, right? Because the liturgical year starts with Christmas. So I guess I should say that it's not the very first one in here. It's the second one in here because on the creation of the world is just kind of the other one, which we actually did back in May, if you remember. So that'll be the next one I do in December. It will also be joined with the O antiphons, the 8 O antiphons in Old English, which will be releasing starting the 17th up through the 24th. I think it was actually traditional in England to actually do the 8 rather than the 7. Now, we don't have 3 of the normal 7, and so I replaced them with the 3 extra ones we do have. And so that should be exciting. I'm not exactly sure the form those will take yet, but those should be up. I have actually translated all of them as of right now. Actually, earlier today, I was in the process of typing them up and editing them as I wrote them out on notepaper. And so also, series number 2, as edited by Liuza, releases in May of next year. I was looking on Amazon earlier, and so I'm very excited. Hopefully, I'll be able to get that. The nice thing about Dumbarton Oaks, so even though I am a broke college student with a wife and children, that Dumbarton Oaks is still not that expensive. So I would still like to get Ælfric's Lives of Saints that Dumbarton Oaks did in 3 volumes last decade. So anyways, the thing to mention about this homily, of course, is that this is what Liuza says in his note. Actually, Clement was Bishop of Rome from around 92 to 100 CE and widely honored in early medieval England. Ælfric's homily is a retelling of the story of Clement's preaching and martyrdom. Its source is an anonymous Passio Clementis. To this, Ælfric attaches a long series of biblical and hagiographical examples, showing that, contrary to the many stories of martyrdom told here and elsewhere, sorry, that's supposed to be a dash, but I was using the Icelandic keyboard and didn't realize, I guess, that I was hitting the right key in the English keyboard, but the wrong one in Icelandic. God does sometimes rescue his saints from persecution. This seems to be Ælfric's own work, and no source has been found for it. So it's very interesting in some sense that a good chunk of this homily is the formation by Ælfric. And I would ask you maybe, how effective do you think this works? Because in a lot of other ones we have, it's mostly based off of other people's works. And in this case, a lot of it is actually Ælfric's Obviously, he knew his scripture rather well. I think it works rather well as well. So again, that news I already shared. Series 2 releases in May. I jumped the gun there. Anyways, again, I look forward to that. I don't know if there's a way for... I know Dumbarton Oaks does actually send out books to people to mention and whatnot. People like me, but not people like me because those people normally have more viewers, more of an audience than I do. So, yes. Of course, I do have more of an audience on my other channel, Liam's Lyceum, if you're interested in that. I've been doing a lot of shorts lately, actually, concerning language. But again, you don't need to go and do that. So, the thing we're going to talk about real quick is the actual martyrdom of Clement. According to 4th century sources, Clement was exiled to Chersonesus, I don't know, anyways, in Crimea during the reign of Trajan. And also from the 4th century, Jerome and Eusebius do not mention his martyrdom, actually, when talking about Clement. But again, same century. So this is actually a monastery in Inkerman, which is near Sevastopol, again in Crimea, on the site of an earlier Byzantine monastery, where Clement's relics were kept before being translated in 869 by Cyril and Methodius. And also a couple other churches related to him and his relics. We have the Basilica of St. Clement in Rome, which is where Cyril and Methodius took those relics, for the most part, actually. So this is a super large looking basilica. Of course, I've never been. And this is where one other of his relics is this Kiev Monastery of the Caves, which is absolutely stunning in my mind. And his head can be found here. So I think this is absolutely stunning. When I saw this, I sent this picture to my friend who is Orthodox. So, but anyways, that is as far as like his martyrdom and his relics are concerned. Well, I don't actually go much in his martyrdom here. If you're more interested, Ælfric retells the martyrdom, and you can go listen to that beginning part of the homily. Is where it is. Okay, so again, I kind of want to touch on temporale and sanctorale, as this is the time actually. So this year, Clement's Day fell on the 23rd, which always falls on the 23rd. So it is sanctorale, right? It is always on the 23rd. But this year it was also on a Sunday, so it lines up with some other stuff. So Stirrup Sunday is what the last Sunday before Advent, and Advent begins November 30th this year. And so it is Stirrup Sunday, which is also the Feast of Christ the King. And so Feast of Christ the King, Stirrup Sunday are always around the time of Clement's feast day, Catherine-tide as well, which I mentioned here. In fact, this is a picture by me of a caraway cake. That's the first ever caraway cake I made. I've made a few more since. They don't look much prettier, but they taste delicious. Actually, I'm a big fan. So yeah, so again, we're getting really close to Advent. And so just heads up, November 30th is the traditional beginning of Advent. And then after those 4 weeks, I guess, we'll get to Christmas very shortly. It's very close. So, hey, and so the stir-up idea actually comes from several Latin prayers, actually, which begin Excita Domine, right? So stir us up, kind of, Lord, right? It's obviously related to the word excite. And it's also a day to stir your pudding, Christmas pudding, though I've never made that. So, but I guess it is traditional. And you can see it here, actually, in this right here, Excita Domine, the shortening of Domine. And also you have a translation of a Latin, probably not this one exactly, but of something like it. Egg our hearts, Lord of might, rather, sorry. Thy son's ways so to dite, that we may, when he comes, with worthy work welcome him. Don't be confused with a th. It's just a t sound, and you can tell because it has a thorn otherwise for the sound. And egg here means like egg on, right? Like he egged me on to do this right thing. So not as in like I He threw some eggs at me. Throw some eggs at us, Lord. So anyways, there's that, which again, already passed, but something to keep in mind. And one thing that I was definitely thinking about with the beginning of Advent, and I'm still thinking about it, is, well, some things I would say traditionally associated with Advent, and as giving, almsgivings in particular. It is, I think, pretty well recorded that people give the charity more at this time of year than any other time of year. And which is good. So the reason I want to do almsgiving here to explain this poem actually is this is from the Exeter book. It is very short. This is the whole thing right here. It's 9 lines, I think. Excuse me. So it's the same length as Cadman's hymn. I actually recently had an article released on this poem in a magazine called Corncrake. I didn't put the link in here. If anyone's interested in reading it, it is free to read. So just go look for a very blandly titled almsgiving poem from the Exeter book by Liam Cutie Hall in that issue. But I'll try to link it down below if anyone wants to go read that. But here, I think we could just talk about a little bit of the poem. So let me read it real quick. Verbith tham eola thechim on inan habath. Redi hidi wer huru me hertan. Dat him bith for worlde wert min de mast. Und for usum drichtne dome selast. Evnes wache mir watra thone walindan. Le adwasha that he ling nemai. Black birninde burkham shedan. Swache mid al mesan ale toshuveth. Sina wunda saul lachna. So, and then this here I translated it. It is well for that earl or man, hero or whoever, right, who inside himself has the right-minded man, a roomy heart, that for the world is the most honor, and for our Lord the noblest repute. Even so, he with welling water the flame extinguishes, so that he cannot for long in the cities be injured with bright burning. So he with alms scatters all, so he with alms scatters all the wounds of sin, tending the soul. Right, so this Lochnath, you can tell, is actually related to the word leech. That's like doctoring the soul, leeching the soul, I guess. And then you have alms right here. Let's see. Yeah, extinguishes. Bright burning. This is probably more like a bleak rather than black. Welling, so like boiling water. Is one actually this shows up in the homily, and I translated it as boiling. It felt like it made more sense in that case, but so noblest repute. Yeah, I mean, I go in more in depth in the article if you want to go read it real quick. Again, it's not very long; it's about 1,000 words. But one thing, this poem, it is seemingly actually taking from a verse from Ecclesiasticus. And this latter part of it, and it kind of had made its way into English as a proverb at the time. Actually, I'd say Fulk and Kane in their introduction to Old English literature kind of talk about this idea of proverbs in English, and how English was much more okay with proverbs and whatnot in the past before the Romantic era, and then in the Romantic era we became less okay with them. As well, we got some new ideas about like novelty and whatnot. So anyways, I think it is a very short but sweet poem, and I enjoy it. Hopefully you enjoy it as well. So I also want to talk about, since we're talking about Clement, right, strictly, is that the first epistle of Clement. There is another epistle of Clement, I believe, just 2, maybe there's 3. Let's see, this book I have here, so this is Apostolic Fathers, Volume 1. It's a lob, I think is how you normally say it. They are ancient Greek texts. You can see the ancient Greek and the English translation, this case done by Bart Ehrman. And I actually got this at the time when I got this to get to read the Didache. But I've also read some of Clement's in here. That's the very first book in here. And the interesting thing about Clement's, the first epistle of Clement, at least, because it's believed the second epistle is not written by him, or not by the same guy. Clement actually never mentions his name in the first epistle of Clement, but tradition says it's by him. And it's actually the oldest material, like Christian material, that is not actually included in the New Testament. For example, it should be seemingly is older than, say, like the Book of Revelation, right? So it is actually included in some medieval sources, right, as in part of the New Testament. Today it is not, right? It would be considered New Testament Apocrypha. It's not bad, I guess. I think maybe if you could read it, there's probably a way to find it online. Maybe I'll look to see find it online. But I don't remember these little editions costing all that much money from Harvard, and classic stuff seems to be in some ways a bit more readily available than Germanic stuff. So, but yeah, so again, can recommend it if you would like to read Clement. But again, it's probably available online somewhere. I'll try to find it for you if you are interested. Okay, and then also speaking of almsgiving, I just like to put in these things whenever I can. Right, we've gone over Old Saxon, we've gone over Old Frisian, gone over a little bits of like Old Norse, and a little bits of Gothic. Right, so I think here is a good chance to actually talk about Old High German before this first year is up. We're gonna throw some Old High German in here, and so essentially in my mind we have the beginning of the liturgy of Advent, right, coming up. We also have the beginning of creation. We have the beginning of everything, right? And so here is actually, we're not going to look at this manuscript so much, but if you want to look at it real quick while it's open, you can see that there's actually this rune here, and that is representing the sound ga, which is the same as ye, the ge in Old English. It's actually a bind rune, a combination of the G and I. And it seems to be this seems to be a Bavarian manuscript, southeast part of modern day Germany. The manuscript also shows some elements of Anglo-Saxon influence, particularly this right here, the Turonian S, you'll recognize as, and though it's not on in Old High German, it's enti. So you see many of those, which makes sense with the level of clergy that would be coming from England at the time. And so it would make sense to see this Anglo-Saxon influence, just like we did in the Old Saxon influence. So this is actually rather old. As far as Old High German is concerned, it is dated normally to the end of the 8th century. And it is, well, it's not very long, actually, as you can see. I mean, it has the scripts is uncial, not that hard, I think, in my opinion, to read, but this could be a little clearer. The manuscript itself is a little worn out looking. We'll look at more manuscripts on our Codicology section here at the end of this session, and those are a bit easier to read. But I just want to give you a chance to look at it real quick. You can actually tell it's divided into two parts, that it is divided into an actual poetry part and then a part that is just a prayer. So it is often called the Wessobrunn prayer, and sometimes it's called the Wessobrunn creation and the Wessobrunn prayer. Right? You can actually get it. This is very cool. It's a very new volume here. The Old High German poetry, an anthology edited by Brian Murdoch. I don't have this because I am a broke college student, again, with a family, and this time of year I would just have like no money, essentially. And because I work in a factory. Anyways, I digress. This is not that expensive, at least in the United States. I believe it is about $20, at least in paperback. I'm planning on getting it soon-ish, whenever I can. There's not a bunch of Old High German poetry that survives, but there's some. And Murdoch is a great translator. He's a great editor. I don't know, again, how this volume works. I think it's probably facing. It's probably the Old High German on one side and his translation. He probably gives like footnotes or a commentary or something. I do have his version of Waltarius, which is a Latin poem coming from a German tradition. But and particularly it's Germanic, right? It's about Walter of Aquitaine. And I can recommend that. But I don't have this quite yet. But again, if you want to read it, I definitely think this is probably the way to do it, is to get Murdoch's book from Uppsala Books. And again, kind of like Dumbarton Oaks, actually, Uppsala Books produces really good content that is rather cheap. I've mentioned them a couple times on here. But for example, they have just their latest release is actually this King Arthur book, which I did use the little extra pocket change I had to get. So the next pocket change purchase will be this Old High German poetry anthology. So anyways, let's get into it. So the first part's going to be the creation. And then hopefully, okay, bear with me. I think I probably can do this okay, but I am not an expert on Old High German, mind. But I think the fun thing about when I was doing this translation actually is just that this is pretty close to Old English. What's funny here is I actually just realized that I failed to put the rest of the first line up there. And so I will say that the first line is, "This I learned from Min as the foremost wisdom," is one way to translate it. So the first line is the one that gave me the most problems, actually. The rest of it, not so much. So anyways, let's get into it. So this I learned from Min as the foremost wisdom. This is the first line again. Sorry, I forgot to put that all up there. But dat gafregen ich mit firehim firiwiso mesta. Ad ero ni was noch ufhimmel. Ne baum no perik ni was. Ni stero, which again, this is an emendation, as there's nothing here. If you look at the manuscript, you go back to the manuscript, you can tell that there's actually nothing there, but as far as for alliteration purposes, it seems like there should be, and it was just left out on accident. So nistero no genig and no suno ni skein, no mano ni lukta, no der mareo seo, da do dar ni wicht ni was inteo ni wenteo. Enti do was der eno al machtico cotamano nirtisto. And enti, sorry, dar warun auch manake mit inan. Kutelchi ge gesta. Enti kot gelak. So you can see actually that this is alliterating, right? You can see it in the first line on the F, fregen, firachim, firiwizo. And right, you can see it as well here on the P's, which is interesting actually, because one thing you'll realize also really quick, right, is W's is the W sound, right? You see this in, say, like some Anglian sources and earlier ones in particular, like Northumbrian in Old English. Also, these P's certainly a dialect feature, but they're mostly modern B's, and they're B's in all the other Germanic languages. Again, P's are rare, so this is a sound change to a dialect. Certainly, I would guess. Let's see. Well, again, the Turonian et you got here. Oh, and also the G's. So essentially, you get a lot of devoicing, right? So your B's become P's and your G's become C's. All right. So, which is interesting. So, also another thing, before I get into the translation, is that this phrase right here is hopefully recognizable to you, assuming you have some experience with Old English. Manol murtisto, which is really similar to line 3181, which is the before last line, the penultimate line in Beowulf, which is describes Beowulf as mana mildest, the exact same. It's the most mild, the mildest of men, right? Which is interesting because this is actually describing God. And so what's interesting also is that this is a creation story, and you could probably make some similar comparisons, some comparison analysis with some Old Norse texts as well. So this I learned from Min as the foremost of wisdom, that there was not earth nor heaven above, so over Himmel. Again, doesn't survive in English at all, but if you know modern German, arrow is earth here. Nor tree nor mountain was there, so this is Berg, essentially. Berg. This has actually been amended to a G, so I could probably have a G here. Amended in the text. And again, remember, they're P, you expect a B here, so Berg, which is Berg in Old English for Berg. Baum in modern German for tree, related to the English word beam. No stars, nothing, nor shone the sun. Sun didn't shine, essentially. There's no moonlight, moonlight. The sea, which is actually a compound. It looks like to me, it looked like a mirror sea, but I wasn't actually sure. So, again, I would like to look at Murdoch's book and see what he says about this. And then there was nothing end nor change. There is not end nor change, essentially. These are the verbs here. The end nor change. So, and then there was one Almighty God, mildest of men, again, and there were many with him, godly spirits, so Geist, right, Gesta, and God holy, or holy God, right? So that is the creation, the alliteration that we actually have, this Germanic alliteration on display, which is very cool. Again, I think personally you can see a lot of similarities to English. I think you even see them more so in the second part, which is the prayer. So, God almachtico, du Himmel en die Erde, ga worachtos, en die duur manun so manak kut, forgapi, forgib mir in dino ganada rechta galaupa. I don't know why there's no verb here. Anyways, enti kotan Wilion wisdom enti spachida. An kraft tuvlun za wieder stantane enti ark zapi wisana enti dinan wir leon za gawork. I guess there's no actual U here, but I think there's an implied gaworkana. So to me, this is like trying to like read when you're really tired. This is what it feels like, right? It looks really similar, and you feel like, what is going on? At least that was my experience with this. But it was really nice that if I just looked at it long enough, looked at it hard enough, it just started clicking. Kind of like you had in the first part where you just have to make some sound changes. Once you kind of move this around a little bit in your head, to me at least, in my experience, it made more sense. So God Almighty, it's pretty close, pretty similar. Thou, heaven and earth, that's pretty straightforward. You rot, right? You rot. Okay. And thou, two men, so much good. So you get that longer O, right? Just in Old English, it's God is God and God is good. Okay, which is why they're not the exact. Even though they're spelt the same in Old English, they're not spelled the same in modern English because good has that longer O. Forgapi. And again, so if you make this a B here, forgav looks a little bit more similar, which is he gave in Old English, hey, forgav. And so again, give, sort of for you, me and thine, mercy, which I think, I can't remember exactly. This I think is related to the modern word for mercy. Anyways, right, which again looks like richt, and then galaupa. What does that look like? It looks like elaf. So it looks like belief or faith. And goodwill, wisdom, and powerful thoughts. I had a hard time with this one actually. So that seems close. I'm not sure if this is like the best translation for it actually. And strength, so craft or power, right? And look at this one too. Tiuflon. This is a plural actually. I believe dative, but it looks a lot like Deovul, and it is Deovul. A little. It looks. I say it looks a lot like. If you squint, I think you can tell that it is Deovul. So in strength to withstand the devil, or the devils, I guess, if you want to put it that way, and to shun evil. I think this evil right here, arc, and to work thy will. So work thy will, right? Okay. So I think this is a neat little prayer. Again, rather short, but maybe not the best introduction to Old High German, but I don't know what else. Again, because Old High German, at least in, I'm sure on the internet there are some better sources for it, but they're probably in German. Often the case, as with Old English, it's most of the scholars, at least these days, are English or American. Though I guess that's actually less the case, but I would still say that's probably maybe like broadly true. And then the ones that deal with Old Saxon and with Old High German are broadly German. So, but again, not completely the case. Okay, so another thing I thought was important to mention here right at the start, I say right at the start, but 30 minutes in, is the word kidera. I think we've mentioned it before actually, and it is a word meaning martyr, but more strictly, what is it, right? So era is this like suffix, right? I mean, the agentive. Someone that is doing something, like a woodcutter cuts wood. Anyways, but it is a kuther essentially, right? Kuth meaning knowledge, right? So someone that makes things known. It is a witness, essentially. A kithera is a witness. This is part of that Winchester school of interesting words. Ælfric, I would say, actually prefers the word martyr, but you do see the word kithera show up some, and so some dictionaries don't even mention this word, as far as I'm aware. So that's why this might help you to parse it. So essentially, it means a witness. If you want to view it in an earlier Christian sense, a professor, someone who professes the faith, but strictly also a martyr, because a martyr literally just means a witness, anyways. So you profess it, they kill you for it, and then you're a martyr, right? You are a witness of it, right? Because you were willing to die for your witness, right? For your profession. So it is pretty much a translation of martyr, which in the Greek essentially means witness. So again, if you wanted to form this noun again in modern English, you can make the newer formation of kuther, right? Kuth, someone as uncouth as unknown, right? Or the Kuth home or whatever, the Lonely Isle. I don't remember. I think it was Tolkien's thing. But so that'd be like a modern formation of it. But I think the word like to make known actually does survive, and it is kaith in like a Scots dialect, and so you just put that suffix back on there, just the R in this case, and it'd be kaither. And then that's your word, your witness, your martyr, I guess, if you want. So someone that makes things known. Okay, and so we're going to get briefly into some words of notes, and then I have like 2 little sections I wanted to try out, so I don't get don't overwhelm you, but also give you some stuff that I think is important. So we have the word raks, which is an exile journey. It is the ancestor of the word rock. I should say the rak part. Rak is an ancestor of the word rack. It is related to the word wretch, which comes from recha. So and that means exile as well. So also the word weston, which is wasteland or desolate. It's actually not related to the word waste, though it was displaced by waste in the Middle English period. I think you can read some Middle English texts, and weston will still show up. Also, you have ex, which is, of course, the dative plural for axle, modern axle, which means shoulder. I'm not sure. Maybe in certain circumstances, someone would use the word axle to mean to like my shoulder here. I've never heard anyone say that, but mostly I hear axle restricted to cars, but it does mean shoulder. And it is an English word, a rather old one. And then you have eudosia, which means to visit, just kind of uncommon in my mind. And then we have nachwist, which is a neighborhood, a fellowship. It essentially means nigh being or existence, so the stuff that exists nearby. And you have the which is a mystery, which is related to the word rune, of course. I do wonder, in some sense, like, what are the mysteries? Like, what are they? When they say the mysteries of God, is this implied? Like, I'm curious what is being translated here. Is this implied like mysteries, like the secret ceremonies, right? That someone like Mithras or Isis is known to have. I mean, I think there's probably evidence that the early Christians did have something like a mystery. But in our mind, we see the word mystery. That's not what comes to mind. But historically, that is what it is. Actually, our idea of mystery is rather new. So I'm curious on that. And then we have Niwerna, which means young or tender. And then more. We have Kosian, which means to kiss. I think Kisan is the more common and more direct ancestor for the word kiss. You have Aker, which is acre, which means field. It's related to the word agar, as in agriculture. You have foda versus meat. I don't know. I mostly just want to mention this one because there isn't seemingly actually much of a difference as far as I'm aware semantically in Old English. If someone has like an article that points to otherwise, but foda just means food and meta means food as well, but it's obviously where we get food and meat. You have quatertern, which is a house of lamentation or like wailing, moaning. Quadrat, again, groaning is unattested actually by itself. It only shows up here. Aaron being the house or place. And then you have Isen in the homily, at least, which is Isern or iren, the rhoticized version there, which is where iron comes from. So it has been rhoticized. It actually seemingly comes from a Proto-Celtic word originally from Isar. I've heard a few theories on what this means exactly, so I'm not sure on which one would be correct. Then we have walinda, which we mentioned earlier, which is welling or boiling. Tredowina, which is pretty much treein. If you ever read an old text that says treein, it just means wooden, made of trees, right? And which makes also sense that, I mean, the word tree in Old English oftentimes just have the meaning of wood and not so much like the living tree. And even if you don't have that in mind, it still makes sense anyways. Oh yeah, and then the last one for words of note, we have forskyttan, which means to shut out or shut off, and it is where we get the word for shut. And then one I wanted to point out a little bit more, because this was in my mind when I saw it. It was okonalan, which I believe comes up in the homily in the past, but this is the infinitive, and it means to set fire, to kindle, to burn, inflame. It can be inflame like emotions as well. It does actually survive, but I think only in metallurgic sense with the verb anneal. And then I have there's cognate. So onalan is the verb, but there is a noun, and we see this noun actually show up at the very beginning. Njál's saga is probably the most famous, at least historically, of the sagas, of the Old Norse sagas, and it is very, very popular. But when you get to the actual like penultimate, or like really the climax of some sense of the story, the burning of Njál, this is the very beginning of it. This is the beginning of the burning of Njál chapter. This is the first line. Okay. Ler toku nu eld och gerðu bar mikit fyrir dyrunum. Tha malti skarpheden. I don't actually tell you what he says, but that's just like the first chunk, right? The first two sentences in a sense. Though this is not quite complete. So they took, toku looks like took, right? Now eld, which is related here, fire, and made or prepared or whatever a grate. So Michel in Old English. Mikit in this case is Mikel, and if you look up in a dictionary at least. Balefire, bale, which has a balefire is almost redundant, but in modern English not so much. So before the doors, again dative plural, and then Malti Skarpheden. So then spoke or meld, modern English meld, which is why I put it here. Skarpheden. You can see that we've seen this word probably several times in Old English already. Like if for example, I always think of the big capitals we have of Widsith, right? Widsith Matolada or whatever, right? Like Widsith spoke. So, but modern English mel does mean speak. Though again, dialectal probably like north of England, maybe Scots. So we didn't also that we have the direct cognate though to eld here, which is aled in Old English. And it's cognate to this. And actually, this becomes eld in Middle English and doesn't survive in Modern English. Though if you wanted to reclaim it, you probably could spell it the exact same way it is here in Old Norse, the exact same way it is in Middle English as eld, E-L-D, and it would mean fire, right? And it actually does get borrowed from English seemingly into some Celtic languages, Breton, Cornish, and Welsh, where the Cornish doesn't look as much like eld, but the Breton and the Welsh is pretty convincing. So just thought that was an interesting one. And then, did I skip one? I did. Okay. So I wanted to take one word, which is this is how it appears. Again, dative plural, edrum, edrum, in the homily. I was just thinking I've used this word actually in one of my fiction pieces that is published, and I can't believe I use it because I'm sure no one understands it when they read it. Like I put like eder, I think was the word I used if this was like a modern sense. Because Old English is adra here, which means vein or river, sinew, kidney, right? So it comes from Proto-Germanic edro, which means vein or rivulet. In Old Norse, adr is cognate. Dutch, ader. German, gosh, I feel like I'm going to get confused here with my German. Ad, Ada, I think it is. I don't think you say that R really. And so it'll mean vein. This is coming from a Proto-Indo-European here, essentially, like this is the root. You attach this to it and it becomes the mean lung or internal organ. Again, this is all reconstructed. I forgot to put my asterisks here, so apologies for that. But it does actually, this pretty much the only thing directly related to this, like directly super close, ethro, is ancient Greek, etor, which you can see in my mind rather obviously related. It means heart. I think this is only really used in epic verse, but and then also related from this root, so minus this ending over here, right? Being, but this root is one thing cool is interesting that is it's onomatopoeic, right? It is the sound of breathing, right? And I'm not really good. I'm not good at these these H's in Proto-Germanic or Proto-Indo-European at all, but it's like all right, so that's interesting. Anyways, so you have the Old English ethian and andian, which are verbs related to like breathe. Old Norse anda, andi is the noun. Proto-Germanic ethmas, that means breath, breathe, spirit. Wins Old English adem, which means the same thing essentially. Middle English edem, again, if you want to borrow it, it means the same thing essentially. The German atem means again the same thing essentially. And then actually Old Irish athach, something like that, which also means breath or breeze. So there are a couple relations we can see here, which is what I just wanted to share, right? Just this part talking about cognates. The second part I want to talk about is specifically descendants of just random word that I find interesting, right? And so in this case, we have chavel, which means jaw or cheek. Generally, when you see it in Old English, that's probably the best way to translate it. It can sometimes mean beak, bill, or snout. So I have a couple examples here. We have Sewoda, tha awinda awe his chavlas from dara harkan chanda. The madman turned away his cheeks from the hollow's hands, to the saint's hands. Ælfric on St. Martin's Day, which was recent rather. I kind of wish I could have done a homily for it, but. And then also we have, also from Ælfric, actually, min havod, he hath mit his chavlum befangen. My head he hath with his jaws caught. So again, jaws in this case makes a bit more sense with his cheeks caught. Doesn't make a ton of sense in modern English. And the first one, he turned away his jaw from the hollow's hands. Doesn't make as much sense, right? And then also in the case of beak, bill, snout, this example actually, I think the word jaw would work maybe even better. But it was an example where I thought, yeah, you could put snout here. So thought he tobrugdon blorichum chavlum, that they pulled to pieces with bloody jaws or snouts. In my mind, they are describing men, but to me, it's essentially describing them as beasts. And so describing them with snouts makes sense to me. And so in Middle English, actually, we have what I'm going to share here is because in Middle English, it does have generally the sense still of jaw and cheek. That is the main sense of it. But you get some other senses, which is what I wanted to put here. So he strake the dragon in at the chavel, which means throat here, that it come out at the navel. Right? You can obviously tell he's going for some rhyming here as well. This is probably from about 1370 or so. I'm not exactly sure. But it is the poem Owain. And then you have the earlier, I believe, Ankrina Hrula, which I have a copy of actually, but it's not here, which is famous, I think, maybe more so because Tolkien edited the manuscript for the Early English Text Society. So this would be a 13th century text, so which is the guide, the rule, right, for Ankren, which is Anchorus, right, Anchoruses. And so which is a pretty interesting text, actually. It's funny because it has like a little preface in the manuscript that is written in Middle English, but essentially it says like, we can't understand this. And then the Middle English you get in the whole rule is, it's pretty conservative. Excuse me. So St. Gregory saith, silence is the opposition essentially of words, and bringeth forth jabber, right? So words cause you to jabber, right? This chabla, right? And so you actually have the sense of kind of like jawing, actually. It's a similar to jawing, though jawing doesn't quite mean that. Jawing can mean like a being berated, and sometimes it just means talking in general. It doesn't really have the same sense as jabber, but it's still a similar development in my mind. So in modern English, what we get from chavel is the modern English word jowl is coming from chavel. You also have the really rare word chavel and chow. And you do have the verb jabber. It is coming from these, actually. And so jaw itself, the word jaw, which is the much more modern word for jaw, jowls would be your cheeks in this case, right? Seemingly comes from an old French word. It's actually got quite the contested etymology, but it might come from an unattested Germanic word in English, right? But when I say unattested, like if it is coming from this Germanic word, it is not attested until modern English, like the 16th century. So that is a big mark against that that etymology for it, at least. So the Old French in some sense looks like it makes more sense, but it does have cognates in Frisian and Dutch and German, so it would also make sense that we would have this, and that would be related to chew, right? If jaw is coming from this Germanic root, it'd be related to chew. Again, that's like an aside though, because we were talking about chavel here. Anyways, that is that part. Now we're going to get to the codicology, and this is the last slide I have here. We're 46 minutes in. This is about where we normally are. I have 3 links here because, first off, I will probably put all these down below. If you want to look at the manuscript, these 3 are useful. The very bottom one is from Stanford, and what this is essentially a table of contents that I'm not sure who put them together, and I think I've seen some other ones similar to this not on Stanford's website, but that some manuscripts will essentially have this table of contents that oftentimes when you go to the manuscript page itself, depending on who's hosting it, who has put who owns the manuscript and who has put it on the internet, digitized it, some of those manuscripts don't tell you anything, and you have to figure it out yourself. But what's nice sometimes is that when they don't tell you anything, Stanford might tell you something, right? And so this Stanford example, for example, this is Cambridge University Library, LI 133. Okay, this is the manuscript we're going to look at, because that normal Bodleian, I think it was 343 or something like that, doesn't have a Clement homily in there. What's interesting actually is that this one is in there twice. Is it in this manuscript twice? But not really. Actually, you only get like the first slide. Actually, like if I were to go back to my my slides that I had for the homily reading, I think it's that first slide is all you get, actually. So we will look at that one first, and then we will look a little bit more at the one that has seemingly the whole one. Though I believe actually in this manuscript, it is slightly modified than the normal source for Ælfric, as this would be a later text. We'll look at some of the information here in a second when I switch my screen. So we are going to do this. Yes, let me see if I can. You can see my face for a second. Hi. And then we are going to share my screen again. And which one do I want? I think it's this one. Let me double check. No, it is the dark one. Okay. Share. Okay. I hope you can see this. I'm going to zoom in a little bit, but this is actually on folio 60V. Okay. It's harder to see in this because like you'll see this 134 is the page, particularly in this. See, this is one that's like partially useful. If I were to go to the next page, you would actually tell what folio we're on. Look at that. 61 recto. So this is 60 verso, which is exactly where we want to be. One thing before I actually read this, I think this one actually has some useful stuff over here, so I'll just show you if you go to Cambridge's website and decide to look at this. So this manuscript is a remarkable manuscript in that it offers unique evidence for the transitional period between Old English and Middle English. Compiled in the second half of the 12th century, it stands out for being one of the latest extant collections containing Old English texts demonstrating the linguistic, cultural, and historical transformations of its time. Furthermore, its significance lies not only in its contents, but also in its complex history of compilation, usage, and subsequent scholarly engagement. The manuscript primarily, wow, I can't speak, sorry, I'm really tired, primarily consists of texts by Ælfric of Ensham, a monk and abbot known for his large amount of Old English religious prose, such as his 2 set of Catholic homilies and his Lives of Saints. It also includes some penitential material towards the end, 3 anonymous texts, and an Old English translation of Alcuin's De Virtutibus et Virtis, chapters 1 through 13, and the manuscript of some Ælfrician pieces are presented only as passion narratives, suggesting that the book might have originally been intended as a passional. The manuscript underwent several stages of development with contributions from at least 2, but possibly up to 4 scribes, based on both paleographical and linguistic considerations. The current order of text does not reflect their order of copying. Rather, the manuscript was built around a core, and the first 4 texts, it appeared, may in fact have been written last. Some of the texts that were copied earliest focus on the apostles, some later ones. So there's actually quite a bit of information here, and I would recommend you go and read it. It's very interesting, especially if you're interested in the codicology. The nice thing also about this one is if you want to look by the thumbnails, like by the pictures of the pages themselves, that actually is available to you here, and also the contents. This is a very useful table of contents. Many manuscripts do not seem to have these. So, again, this is actually a partial one. It is supposedly from Scribe 1, and that is, yeah, it's from Scribe 1. I'm not sure who wrote the other one, actually. I'm not sure what the hand is considered to be for the fuller text. So we'll go over this one really quick because it's just, there's not much there. Okay, so we'll close this, and then you can see it right here. And then I'm going to pull this up just so I can see it as well. Oh. All right, so what we got is, okay, sorry. All right, so min tha leofastan. Eor ilava with the. Ooh, I read that. Let's see. Trumra? Yeah, okay. Oh, you see. Normally we see this at the end of words. So yeah, so we have the superscript with saying there is a nasal we have cut out here. So it's trumra, right? The firmer, right? If ye. Wait, what? Oh yeah, okay. If ye yechireth, the double ye was confusing me. Yechireth begodis. Sorry, I need to harchum. Huhi, that, again, the abbreviation for that. Helvon licha, richa, ye. Go to the next part. The arnidon. So then we got and, ye machon. Oh, interesting. That's be machon. And the text I have is ye machon. The kuthlikor. Okay, interesting. Toheo is what it says here. Interesting, okay. To her? To him. This is the text again I have. Interesting. Toheo me? Oh, interesting. So someone has edited this. It was originally actually to him. You can see it has been erased. So Tohim Klipian. And it's interesting that someone put Toheo me. I'm not sure what's going on there. Klipian. Yif Geo. Geora. Looks like, yeah, okay. Lives. So the F and the S. Druchtnunga. Eo. Burg. No, sorry, not, yeah, no, Thur, not Burg, sorry. Thur. Laurewa. Bodiunga. So there's an I inserted here. Interesting. Kuda. And then Beoth. This is it, though. Okay, because If you look here, we have like a way wilath or whatever was next. Well, in the homily, we don't have way wilath here. We have this harcha where, right? And this is obviously not the rest of the homily, which is a interesting development in my mind. I don't know exactly what is going on there. But yeah, we don't have the rest of the homily. That is it. That's the very intro part of it. If you look on the next page, yeah, we have the incipit of another homily. So it is not the same. So next we're going to go to 357, because that is where the other one is. Looks like it's by a different hand, but again, I'm not sure which hand this is. Excuse me. And now we can look at this one a little bit. All right. We have min. So now we have a singular in. Sorry, I'm trying to. This is hopefully you just see the screen, but it's kind of a pain on my end. I wish I had two screens. I do not. There we go. Okay. So we have min with, again, just one in here, which in my text, it has two. And I believe it had two in the last one we saw. Min tha leophostan. That is a bit, so that's the S, long S. Yeah, definitely a different hand. T A N. Okay. Leophostan, ewer, Ilava, looks like. Yeah, Ilava, Beast. So you have a Y here instead of an I, as you would expect earlier. Say Trum. Wait, what? TRU. That looks like an I. Tru. Interesting. That is hard to parse. Okay. You expect Trumra, right? But that doesn't quite look like Trumra. I have a hard time convincing myself this would be an A. Yeah, I'm not exactly sure what's going on there. Well, this is Ra, actually. So we have T-R-U-M. Okay, that makes more sense. So T-R-U. I see. This is the R. This is the U. This is the M. And this is our Ra. So Truma, there is no superscript in this case. Yif ye Yehireth. Begodis. Harhum. So you do have a superscript in this case for Harhum. Huhi. That. I would expect Hevon. Yep. Hevon Licha rather than Heovon. So that has either already just become the AO. Looks like it's already starting to become an A sound, as it would be in modern English, which is, yeah, okay. Hevon Licha. Fricha. Ye Arnold. He Arnold. Yeah, okay. Ye Arnodon. Okay, yeah, sorry. Again, a Turonian yet. And Ye Machon. The Kuthlikor. Kuthlijor. Kuthlijor. Okay, interesting. Torchim, so you have the superscript again. Klipian. Yif, Geora, Lives. Drochtum. Looks like, is that? Okay, or no, it is. Okay, so it's Drocht Nunga. The guy over here. Which again, it's a little confusing. Eo. Thur. Laurewa. Bodunga Kuthebeoth. So some of this is easier to read because I know what I'm expecting to read. So let's go at least to the next sentence. So their harga, which is what we would expect, which we didn't get in the last part, if you remember. Their harga, where Clemens. Again, no capitalization there, but that's what we'd expect. Thewe on thisum. Okay, thisum and okay, interesting. So it is just an abbreviation here. This is not and, but rather that prefix of anwardun. Anwardan actually is what we would expect here. in Old English. So on water, done, on water, done. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So we have the present day. That's what it says. On water done die. And what we had in the text that I used for the homily is on water done Fredagsdag, so feast day, festival day. Then we have what's that? Worthiath, looks like. Which is again what we would actually expect. And then was, star, Adigan, Adigan, Petrus, so Petrus, Apostolis, learning. So you have the EO here though, even though you don't have it in heaven up here. Learning, Knecht. Interesting. Okay, that's a start. Let's go to the next page. See what we got. Okay, so we have learning Knecht, which is what we expect again. So then we have tha was, he, theonda, on gast, licera. So not licera, as we'd expect. Lara, and ye knerdnissa, so ye knerd, so probably down here. Yeah, nissa, okay. Ye knerdnissa, to than, so again, the superscript for the N in this case. Swida, that the apostle Petrus hina jazz. Yeah, okay, jazz. Topapan, yeah, okay, so Pope. Graministra Theoda. Aft instead of after. Maybe this is an abbreviation for the though it's a little difficult to read. After his dia. Okay, and on are his thronga hina topaban. Yehadoda. So he is ordained after his suffering. He's ordained and ordained him pope. What does it say? Oh, okay. So on his bishop. So a bishop instead of the bishop, setla, which we see sometimes actually. Ye seta to the that he Thara Kristenra Zra mana Yemena Habda. And then of course we have the next part which starts here with Hi Hadoda. Yeah, okay. So we don't need to go any further than this. I think I might look at this if I have the time more in depth later. But as of right now, that is plenty enough time looking at the manuscript. I hope that proves useful to you. And thank you for joining me for another session of Old English Ælfric homily work. And I will see you in December with Advent stuff. And what I'll probably do is I'll have the anaphones coming out starting December 17th, the first one, and then the homily on the 25th itself. And hopefully, when I have the following lecture, whenever that comes out for that Christmas homily, I'll actually talk about the antiphons as well from Christ 1, the Advent lyrics, as they are sometimes called. Anyways, Liam from an Ælfric Homily Project. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it.